He thought selling a piece of his land would mean freedom, just a chance to move forward with dignity. But in a neighborhood where appearances mattered more than justice, everything changed the moment he put that "for sale" sign near the lake he owned. Within hours, whispers spread. Within days, the homeowners association planned to stop him, and when a single phone call turned into police lights outside his door, it became clear. This wasn't really about a lake at all. This was about power, prejudice, and the ugliness hiding in plain sight. What happened next shocked everyone, but it revealed a truth too many already know. For years, Marcus had found peace in the land his grandfather left behind, a wide stretch of quiet countryside where a shimmering lake sat like a crown jewel in the middle of the property. To him, it was more than water. It was history. Family barbecues, fishing with cousins, afternoons when the laughter of children echoed across the water. It was a piece of heritage carved out in a world that often tried to take everything else away. Marcus worked hard, kept to himself, and asked little from anyone. His neighbors knew him as polite, reserved, and steady, a man who carried dignity the way others carried briefcases. But in this neighborhood governed by an unforgiving HOA, a man like Marcus was always viewed as different. His presence was tolerated, never truly welcomed, and polite smiles often masked whispered conversations after the meetings ended. Still, he was proud of what he had built. He took care of the land, nurtured the lake, and dreamed that one day his children would inherit the peaceful refuge that had given his family so much joy. But when Marcus decided it was time to sell a portion of the lake lot, he had no idea that his quiet decision would hit a nerve the HOA had never bothered to hide for long. Because in this community, property lines weren't just about land, they were about control. And once Marcus stepped outside the boundaries of acceptable, the gloves came off. At first, Marcus thought little of it. A simple listing for a portion of his lakeside property. Something his family had earned, something that belonged to him by every legal right. But within 24 hours, subtle ripples began to spread. Neighbors who once waved from a distance now averted their eyes. The HOA president sent a friendly reminder letter stuffed with vague warnings about bylaws. And on his evening walk, Marcus overheard two board members muttering about how certain people don't need to be inviting buyers out here. By the third day, the whispers turned into full-blown resistance. The HOA demanded that his listing be retracted, claiming it violated obscure clauses that Marcus had never once seen enforced. Meetings became a spectacle. Papers slammed onto tables, eyes narrowing, every sentence tinged with the unspoken truth. It wasn't about the lot, or the lake, or the rules. It was about him. And then came the phone call that shifted everything. Someone had contacted the police, claiming Marcus was conducting illegal sales activity. The accusation was absurd. He wasn't breaking laws, wasn't disrupting anyone, wasn't doing anything beyond exercising his right to sell. Yet, that evening, flashing red and blue lights spilled across his yard, reflecting off the calm waters of the lake. Officers stepped out of their cars, hands hovering near holsters, their presence heavy with suspicion Marcus hadn't earned. Neighbors gathered at the edge of his property, arms folded, lips curled in satisfaction as though they were watching. A prize fight, waiting for him to break down, lose composure, or snap. But Marcus stood tall, answering every question with steady resolve, determination etched across his face. He had done nothing wrong, and there was nothing they could pin on him. Still, the message had been sent loud and clear. His power here was an illusion, and the HOA wanted control. The intimidation didn't end with the patrol cars pulling away. Anonymous complaints started rolling in almost daily. Claims of uncut grass, unapproved outdoor lights, even the color of his fence suddenly out of compliance. Every letter dripped with venom disguised as policy, each one an attempt to shove Marcus back into the corner they'd built for him, and through it, all Marcus realized something deeper. This wasn't a battle over property lines, but over dignity. The sight of a black man owning, selling, and profiting from land of value was the silent outrage none of them spoke aloud. They didn't just want him to comply, they wanted him powerless. But Marcus was no stranger to standing his ground. He had weathered worse storms, and though anger burned in his chest with every petty act of aggression, it also gave him clarity. If they wanted a fight, they would get one, but not the kind the HOA was expecting. Because Marcus was already planning his next move, and when he struck back, it wouldn't just rewrite the balance of power in the neighborhood. It would leave the self-proclaimed gatekeepers exposed in a way they could never recover from. Marcus had seen the warnings, felt the harassment, endured the humiliation. But nothing compared to the moment the HOA realized their intimidation wasn't working. He hadn't backed down. He hadn't pulled his listing. And instead of retreating, he had gone even further, quietly placing an offer on one of the very properties that gave the HOA its power, the lakeside lot owned by none other than the loudest voice against him. The neighborhood buzzed with disbelief when word spread that his offer had been accepted. The same people who sneered at him suddenly found themselves whispering in hushed tones. To them, this wasn't just a transaction. It was an act of defiance, a reclaiming of space they had tried so hard to deny him. But the resistance came swift and ugly. At the next HOA meeting, Marcus walked into a wall of hostility. Papers were slammed down. Angry shouts filled the room. Unfit, outsider, unacceptable. Every syllable dripped with venom they could barely hide anymore. The votes, the bylaws, the legal threats, it all came crashing at him in a tidal wave designed to crush not just his claim, but his very sense of belonging. And yet the ink was already dry. The lot was his. Their outrage had no more weight than the bitter words spilling from their mouths. With that single purchase, everything shifted. For years, they had controlled access to the lake, weaponizing rules and prejudice to keep him on the margins. Now, the entrance that once belonged to them was his to decide. It was the turning point. The same people who had called the police on him now had to look at the reality they feared most. They couldn't ignore him, couldn't silence him, couldn't erase him. In one move, Marcus had done more than secure land. He had taken back power, and with it, he was about to change everything. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the balance tilt. What was once theirs to control, access to the lake, ownership of the land, the unspoken authority of their titles and rules, was now in his hands. The same neighbors who had tried to reduce him to silence now had to knock on his door if they wanted to reach the shores they had guarded so fiercely. He didn't gloat. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence, his ownership, his quiet defiance was enough. And yet, beneath the personal victory, the sting remained. The countless letters, the flashing lights, the accusations whispered as fact. These weren't mistakes. They were symptoms of something larger, something older. His story wasn't just about a lake or an HOA board. It was part of a much deeper pattern. A pattern where black success is met with resentment, where dignity is challenged the moment it refuses to bow, where property lines and rules become weapons in a war over belonging. Marcus had won his battle, but he knew the story didn't end here, because while he had resources, resilience, and the will to push back, many do not. For every Marcus who reclaims the land, there are countless others forced out, shut down, silenced into invisibility. This was one victory in a fight that stretches far beyond the gated edges of a single community. So the question echoes louder than any meeting room threat, sharper than any letter slid under a door. How many more battles like this will it take before we confront the roots, not just the branches of racism? Because Marcus's story isn't just his own, it's ours to reckon with. And the silence of those who benefit most is the loudest part of all.